money is a really strange thing to talk about, especially as it connects with consciousness, because it's really loaded. And it's loaded on purpose, which is a lot of what we're going to talk about today. So I'm really sensitive to talk about this, and there's actually something inside of me that kind of has to find a few extra courage bones inside, because I am always afraid of alienating people and saying something that would not be taken in the, not in the right way, but in a way that I didn't mean it. And yet, one of the challenges is with money is that it's twisted. There's a reason it's that this talk is called Money is Weird, because the entire discussion of money has gotten twisted into our consciousness and wrapped up in all of these really scary emotions like shame, guilt, pride, desire, all these. And so because money's wrapped up in all that, we have personal associations with states of consciousness around money. And that's really wordy, but it's just a wordy way to me to say we're really messed up about money, and it's caught up in our self-worth, and it's caught up in our, it's almost like a prevailing way we see the world. So which I think is what I anticipate a little bit of fear inside of me saying, oh, you're gonna say something and it's gonna upset people's, state of consciousness, and not in a, see, even as I'm saying it wrong, but it's a fascinating talk to give. And it's really important because money's fascinating to me. And I believe that in this year of 2021, we need to completely redefine money. We need to redefine how we understand it. We need to understand its actual reality, what it really is, as opposed to what we've been told it is for the last centuries, millennia. Because we've been told that it actually is a thing, that it actually has value, and it's important to have a lot of it. So now you can hear, like I can hear the argument in my own mind. Yeah, but it does have value if you've got to pay rent. It does have value if you've got to feed your kids. It does have value if I have all those arguments in my own head also. But we have to look at the whole thing. We have to step back and take a bird's eye view without our personal fears in it, because that's the only way we're going to be able to see outside the twists. I remember watching a movie called I Am, and it was a movie by Tom Shadyac. I don't know exactly how to say his last name, but he's a Hollywood producer, and it's a movie, and he calls it a movie about mental illness. And he said, and I know you think it's going to be about, people who struggle in asylums or something like that. And he said, no. He says, this is what I'm talking about. And he started panning over these huge huge estates, And he said, this is what I'm talking about, this mental illness. And again, so there's an argument that comes up right away inside of me that says, Katrina, there's nothing wrong with money. Nothing wrong with abundance. Nothing wrong with, I've got that too. But we have to release all of that also. So what he's saying is he talks about, in the movie, he talks about if you were just living together in a tribe and you went out and you hunted an animal to eat, because everyone had to eat, everyone would simply take all they needed. Every person would just get whatever they needed, they would eat, and life would go on. If one person took more than their share, they would be considered by the group that there was something wrong with them. There was something amuck with them mentally, that they took more than other people. And then, of course, that person that took more has to hide it. And then that person has to protect it. And then they have to fend off the other people. And there's this whole weird fallout from taking more, than others. And he said, this idea of amassing wealth, I'm not talking about abundance. I'm not talking about making a lot of money. I'm not talking about having successful businesses. That's all awesome. That's brilliant. That's fantastic. I'm talking about the goal of amassing wealth. So it's really weird because, like, let's say in my closet, I have a little box filled with money. Let's just say I did, right? That money is no different than the printer paper before it goes in my printer until I spend it. It's nothing. It's just little pretty pictures in a box in my cupboard. And then the argument is, yes, but the potential to spend it is there. The possibility to spend it is there. And it's like, this is virtual land. This is pretend land. And this is what we have to really be clear about money. There's real life, and then there's pretend life. There's virtual life. Everything that isn't actually happening is pretend. Whether it's hopes, dreams, fears, anything, it's all pretend. It's all just existing in our minds. It's not real. And this is a huge deal. This is a huge deal that allows money to control us, because we've been taught that the pretend world is somehow real, and it's not. That money sitting in my closet in a little pretty box is nothing but paper until I spend it. Period. Whether I have 20 sheets of pretty paper or I have 20 million sheets of pretty paper in my closet, it's nothing until I spend it. Why is it valuable when I spend it? Because I got my teeth fixed, or I paid people to fix my teeth, because that money flowed through a service to someone else. They took their kids to hockey. Those people, bought hot dogs. That money flowed through the community, and now it has value. As long as it's sitting in my closet, it has no value. It only has value as literally currency. That's why it's called currency. It must flow, or else it is paper. It's nothing. And this is really interesting, because a lot of our drive, a lot of our fears, a lot of our day, a lot of our time spent every day is about trying to make all of this money. And I get it. We live in a debt-driven society, which means I have to always make money because I'm always in the hole. I'm always drowning in the money piece. So here's a funny thing. So on a personal note, when I was young, money was really easy for me. I always worked. When I was old enough to have a paper route, I think when I was like about 8, I got a paper route and I made money. I loved making money. It was easy peasy. I loved delivering papers. I loved meeting people, and I got money for it. It was awesome. I had a little a fishing, a tackle box, and I sorted all my money when I was a little kid, right? Put myself through university. I loved working. I loved making money. It was easy peasy. I never had a single issue with money. Then I met my husband, who was a farmer, dairy farmer, and we got married. I was a computer programmer at the time. He worked for his parents on the farm. So again, money was sort of easy. Like, we just sort of had money. It was just, we worked, we had money. No big deal. And then one day we decided that we were going to buy the farm. And because it was my husband's dream, that was his dream, was for us to own our own farm, the family farm. And of course, I start looking at the math on this, and it doesn't make any sense. Like, we're doomed. Like, if we do this, we are doomed. We will live in poverty forever, because there was no upside. There was no way that financially we could make it on the farm. But it was really my husband's dream. And so that was the call, that was the path. And I'll never forget it. We bought the farm the day my daughter was born. Like literally, it was August 1st, 1997. And it was the day my daughter was born. I was in the hospital on the phone after my C-section talking to the lawyers and he's saying, we can wait a few days for you to sign the papers. So we buy the farm. I've got a 2-year-old, a brand new baby, and it's just the two of us on this big farm. And we are now $2 million in debt. And I had never experienced that kind of debt. I'd never experienced living in a state where you don't get out of debt. There's no such thing as getting out of debt. Up until that point, I mean, I was young. I'd never even carried a balance on my credit card. I just worked and paid it off. Like it was just that simple. And now I found myself in a kind of debt I'd never fathomed before. And then something changed inside of me. There was like a consciousness shift inside of me that was like, you never will get out of debt. You just work and you just try to climb out, but you never actually get out of debt. And it was a huge blow. It was a huge, it's like, it was like swimming in a space that you just, didn't know what to do. And then, all of a sudden something would break in the silo and that would cost us $5,000. Or a cow would die and we'd have to replace her for $2,000. Like the money was just so big. All the numbers were so big. And then I would say to my husband, I really want to go out for dinner. And he'd say, well, we can't afford it. I'd say, we can't afford anything. And something weird happens in your brain where money, again, in another weird way, has no value because you just are always in debt. I mean, and that's the example on the farm, right? But so many people are in the exact same position. They've dumped all this money into this mortgage, or we've dumped all this money into the car payments or our education or whatever. And there's almost this weird idea that because we have so much debt, money no longer counts. Because it's like, well, what's another $20? What's another $1,000? Who cares? And this weird thing happens in our brain and we think, well, what's another credit card? Well, what's another, like, who cares? I mean, I'm never going to get out of debt anyway. Like, it's this weird thing. And that is even more dangerous because now we're flowing in this weird debt place where I can't stop working. Like, I can't. And yet I never get out of debt. So does money even have value there except for the money I owe the banks? It's so weird. Like money's weird, right? And the hardest thing too in those years, like I value all the years on the farm because, we literally would work like 16, 17 hours a day, just surviving, just to fall asleep at night and get up and do it in the morning. My husband used to joke that we took Sundays off, and we only worked 8 hours on Sundays. That's like a dairy farmer joke. But so it's a very, very interesting thing. And to be honest, it's taken me a long time to get back to the place where money's easy again. We sold the farm in 2009. And so, of course, we had lots of money. And because that's what the joke is, that farmers only get paid when they sell the farm. Up until then, you're just, asset rich, debt, cash poor, asset rich, right? And, so I bought my train station and we bought houses and we did all these things. But yeah, it's anyway, kind of lost my train of thought there. But the money thing is really bizarre because we just start living this life of endless work. Endless work, right? And the debt thing is so weird. So that's the one thing to understand, that to have this talk in a society that is driven by debt is also very hard to fathom. You know, it's really interesting when you come out of debt and you actually are in the clear. We're actually more careful about where we spend our money. When we're already in debt, it's like, yeah, well, whatever. We'll just put it on the credit card. There's nothing connected to it because I'm never going to pay it off anyway. Or maybe I will one day. But as soon as you actually pay all that off somehow, and every dime that comes in, you look at, especially if it's cash, you go, do I really want to spend it there? Because it's real. It's suddenly become real again. It's not in a debt world. It's real. So I want to shift gears a little. And I've told you guys this story before. But a few years ago, I was in Greece. And I was sitting in a garage of a friend of mine. And her husband was telling me a story. And he had been studying with this metaphysicist, kind of Greek Nostradamus type guy. Apparently, I've Googled him later, and there's a lot of controversy around him, which there always is about anyone who kind of speaks against the system. Anyway, and you can take this however you want. It's an idea. It's a construct. And he said, and he spoke this all in Greek, and my friend was translating. And he basically said, he says, there's 3 kinds of beings on the planet. He says, and they all look human. He says, this is what his teacher had taught him. And he said, the first kind, he called them anthropomorphs. And anthropomorphs have no soul, and they run on 2 elements. And they believe that everything is valued by money. And they have created this society that we live in right now. And they've created the scarcity, and they've created everything. And they have woven these thoughts into our mind that every single thing in our life can be valued by money. So, of course, all they have to do is manipulate the money, and they manipulate the people. It's easy peasy. And he says, this is the world we've been living in and struggling with and hurting through. And there's a bigger story about them. Then there are humans. And he said humans run on 4 elements, and they have souls, and they're kind of the victims of the anthropomorphs because they kind of trust and they go, oh, well, yeah, okay, it's okay, right? And he says, then he goes, then there are the Greeks. And then I started laughing, and he goes, no. So he called them the Hellenes, and that the Hellenes also run on ether, and they see things. And what's really interesting about this story, and it doesn't matter whether or not this lands for you or not, but what's fascinating is, let's imagine something like that is true. And someone has told us that every single thing in the world is valued based on these weird little piece of paper in my box in my closet. And what's fascinating to me, the other thing he said the time of the anthropomorphs is over. And he said this, I was in Greece 3 years ago. And he said, and when they're over, when they're done, they will leave, but they will leave clawing their way out. And I believe that that's part of the big shift that we're going through right now, is that we have to look at how we see money. And I don't mean, shift to crypto and gold, or I'm not talking about anything like that. And I'm no opinion about all that. I just mean the idea of it. So, for example, I like to go for walks, and I walk around and I look at these big houses. So Godrich, where I live, it was a port town, like it was it's right on the lake. So right on the edge of the lake, kind of where I live, there's all these huge houses, right? And I walk around the town, and it's almost like I have these multiple timelines playing in my eyes. I don't quite understand it. It's like I see something, and I walk around, and I see these great big old houses with like 1 or 2 people living in them. But what I see is 7 people living in them. And I see people outside in the lawns. And at first I thought I was just imagining it. I thought I was just, making up stuff. But it's all I see. I walk around the town and that's all I see. And then this thought about houses and money starts flowing into my brain. And all I kept thinking was, isn't it strange this house with its 10 rooms is worth more money than that house with its 3 rooms? And for the first time, it was like a spell broke inside of me. And I looked at it and I said, that doesn't make any sense. They're just shelter. A house is just shelter. It's a place to maybe keep your stuff, and it's shelter. How can a place that can house 10 people have greater financial value than a place that can house 3 people? The value is how many people it can house. Or the value is that it's well insulated with a Canadian winter. There is no other value. There is no other human value to that shelter beyond shelter. That house transposed into the Caribbean somewhere may not even be of value because there's no Canadian winters. It doesn't need to be what it is. And it's so curious to me, and that's why even doing this talk is weird, because something has changed in my brain. Whatever that spell is that we were taught by whoever, that house is worth $2 million and that house is worth $200,000. Those sentences don't mean anything to me anymore. It actually sounds silly. It's like saying, well, that house is worth more because it's purple, and that house is worth less because it's orange. It doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any, it just makes, it's such nonsense, right? And yet we've been taught that we need to have a house that's worth $2 million, not the $200,000 house. So you have to keep working. You have to get into the debt. You have to do the thing. You have to do the thing. And this movie, this I Am movie, the reason he made it was because he said, I was standing one day in the foyer of my 5,000 square foot mansion. And he said, I'd made it, rags to riches and all that. And he says, and it dawned on me that they lied to us. He said, making all this money wasn't going to make me happy. I'm still alone standing in this foyer. It doesn't matter. He says, whether I was living in some hut with my 4 best friends, that's happiness. Amassing this money does not bring happiness. And even the idea that, well, not having money makes me unhappy. Does it? Does it really? Is it actually the lack of money that's causing the unhappiness? Or is it something else? So when we look at, we've studied the levels of consciousness by David Hawkins. And if we look at those levels below courage, is it the money that's actually bothering us? Or is it that we are living in a state of pride? And that state of pride tortures us, and the money is wrapped up in it. And if I lose the money, it's my pride that got hit. If I'm living in a state of fear, is it really the money? Or is it that I'm living in a state of fear and this money thing is making it worse? If I'm living in a state of anger, is it really the money thing that I lost that job and my boss screwed me out of that thing and now I can't pay the bills? Is it really the money that's torturing us? Or is it the state of anger? Because it's like we're being told it's the money, which is distracting us from the fact that, wait, something's wrong inside. What am I so angry about? Why is pride such a big deal for me? What am I so afraid of? right? So now when we pop above them, we come into courage and we say, okay, hold on a minute. I can make choices here. We pop into neutrality and we say, well, whether I have money or I don't have money, I guess we'll sort it. Well, whether I lose the house or I don't have the house, I guess something else will come along. Truly living in that place, not apathy. Then we pop up into willingness. Are there money issues in willingness? Really? The challenge is, or the great thing is, when we're beyond pride and we're beyond all these things, and money isn't driving us in all of these other spaces, or it's not getting twisted into all these other spaces, we're kind of willing to do whatever is needed because money's not driving us. And it's like, well, how much do I really need? What if I don't have the big house? What if I just rent? What if I rent in a small town? What if I exchange caring for the children for a little room in someone's house? What if I'm willing to do all that? What if I'm happy that my soul will experience whatever it's going to experience? Whether it's climbing the mountain or it's walking through the valley. I know that my soul is just having an experience. You know, when I first gave everything away and started traveling, I didn't have any money. It's not that I was living on a nest egg. I didn't have any. I had to make it or whatever. And I actually racked up credit card debt around it because it was, you know, it was challenging moving around the world and trying to do a business and stuff. And so at one point, I was actually seriously considering kind of doing the no money thing. Like, because you hear about that. You hear about people who live on no money. And it isn't that they're, you know, parasites or, you know, they're just mooching off their friends and stuff. They're actually parts of the community. And as I was pondering this, because when I was planning on leaving, I wasn't sure how to do it. I knew I was sort of branching into something new, and I thought, how do I really want to do this? Because I don't want to be driven by having to make money. And yet I knew I was meant to do whatever I was meant to do. And then my friend and I ended up in Northern Ontario at a B&B. And it was just a B&B in this old farmhouse in the middle of nowhere. And it was just this young couple who had bought this place and thought it would be a really cool destination for Toronto people. But it was actually just really a rundown old farmhouse. We're like sleeping in this really like kind of creaky bed. Like they were kind of going with the whole, you know, rustic, authentic thing, which really just meant it was really old. And so my friend and I are, you know, and there's no Wi-Fi, there's no nothing. It was hilarious. And she had young children. And we went down to have breakfast, and we're sitting there waiting for her to make us breakfast because it was a B&B. And I was feeling so guilty because she had like a 5 and a 3-year-old and a newborn or something. And so she is literally stressed out. Like these kids are at her ankles and one's on her hip and the other one's crying in the other room. And here she is trying to make us eggs. And I'm sitting there like, can I help? Oh, no, I'm fine. I'm like, no, really? Like you shouldn't be serving us. This doesn't make any sense what's happening here. And I'm watching this young mom and I'm realizing how incredibly tired she is. And of course, then I'm pondering, you know, how do I want to travel? And I seriously thought about it. I thought, wow, imagine if I just lived with people and just helped with childcare. Even if this mom had 3 hours that I played with the kids and she could go and do her thing. You know, how much value is that? How much value is that to that young mom? How much value is it to me to have a bed to sleep on? Right? There's no money about it. It's just the value exchanged. And I thought, wow, that's so interesting. And I'm not recommending this. I'm not recommending this as an entire societal idea. But it's an interesting thing to start there, to really actually say, what can I contribute? How can I help? How can I be of value to you? How can we be of value to each other? Maybe one of us loves to, plant vegetables, and another person loves to take care of kids, and another person loves to build houses. Like, it's an interesting thing that if we lived in a more organic community, we would simply exchange the true human value of what we do. And it's almost like somewhere deep in our hearts, we know this. We know that this is possible. We know that we're meant to look to our gifts and share that with the community. But because we have this weird false economy, this weird pretend world of money, where all the debt is, where all this valuing of houses, the valuing of all these things. Like, my sister's son has a construction company, and so he wanted to buy a truck, like a pickup truck. And we're like chatting, and I mean, it's been a long time since I've bought anything like a pickup truck. And apparently these trucks he was looking at were like $86,000. And I said, what does he need a truck worth $86,000 for? And she says, well, it's just the going rate for the, and I'm like, what? When did a pickup truck become worth $86,000? Like, that's crazy. Like, so it's really interesting because, and I feel like right now, in this year of 2021, it's like we're between worlds. Many, many people are looking at their jobs and saying, is this really what I want to be doing? Because historically, we had other things that were driving us. Well, I'll stay in this job because it has a great pension. I'm going to stay in this job because it has good benefits. I'm going to stay in this job because I have to pay the rent. I'm going to stay in this job because it looks good to my parents and it looks good to the neighbors. I'm going to stay in this job because it allows me whatever. But as our consciousness shifts, we keep looking at it going, but it's not in alignment with who I am. It's not in alignment with my soul. It's not what my soul came to do. It's almost like we're finally able to see our own soul, because we're not just kind of part of the machine, part of this strange virtual world of money. And I mean this in air quotes because I don't know what it is exactly. Right? One of my favorite movies is the movie Michael with John Travolta. He's an angel. And anyway, he's down on Earth and he's sitting in the back of the station wagon, and they're heading for Chicago. And they're listening to the radio, and it said something like, hog futures are up. And Michael starts to laugh. He's like, hog futures are up. Because, of course, he's just there to help the humans have a human experience, to actually explore the world and experience what this place is. And he's like, hog futures? Like, it's sort of this amazing little vision into, what is this all about? What is going on? It's so bizarre. And my friends and I, we often will sit around and we'll chat about visioning a different future, visioning a very human, joyful world. And what's really fascinating is when we kind of sit with our eyes closed and we imagine, say, a little place like Goderich. And this place is like, just literally picture a Pleasantville. That's Goderich, where I live. Tiny little 8,000 people little town by the lake. It's quite pleasant. And so now imagine that the shelters around are just shelters. The value of the shelters are based on how many people can comfortably live there. People live in them, they care for them. So now what do you need as a human? What do you need? You have shelter. Forget about all the banks and the false economy stuff. Let's imagine, let's vision. Because again, does this change whether you can pay the rent today and all that? No, we have to, those are other things. But let's imagine this, because our discussion is money is weird. So let's imagine when it isn't. So you have shelter. Now what? What do you want to do? What do we do as a community? Well, as a community, we need food. So we grow some food. And it's funny because we're kind of like, well, I don't even know. Like as society, we've been so driven by work. And the truth is, I love working. I love paper routes. I love making coffee. I love gardening. I love caring for mostly teenagers, not little kids so much. There are things we love to do, right? It's like, I was once in a circle and I don't know who it was, but it was this really lovely native elder who was teaching, and she was teaching this room full, and everybody in the room, everybody was healers. They were Reiki practitioners, all kinds of people in the alternative healing realm. And she said, now, let's say we all were part of a community. What is it that you would want to contribute? And she said, and what you contribute has to be actually of value to the community. Everybody can't be the healer. Not saying there can't be a healer, but everybody can't be a healer. What do you like to do? And people just started saying, well, actually, I love doing laundry. Well, actually, I love building stuff. Well, I actually love collecting berries. And suddenly everybody had to kind of come out of the imaginary world that we've been sort of trained, where we find our career and all that's wrapped up in all this stuff. And we actually had to be of value to the community. This changes everything. You know, one of my favorite people to read in the last year was Thoreau, right? And he wrote Walden Woods, and this was back in, I don't even know if it was in the 1800s, but it was a long time ago. And he actually lived on a little plot of land that Emerson owned, and he built his own shack on Walden Pond. And his intention was to prove how little a human being actually needed to survive. Because a lot of times the fear around money is this idea that, but I have to do this to survive. I have to do this. And this was even the same in the 1800s. I feel like it was even earlier than that. I feel it was like the 1600s. I just don't remember when it was written. But this was the same mentality, you know, whether we're 2021 or 1645 or something, whenever this book was written. And so he said, no, we're being sold a bill of goods here. This isn't true. And he went to the woods and he tried to figure out, what if we got rid of all the nonsense? What if we got rid of all the pretend, all the trying to look good to other people, trying to make other people happy, trying to fulfill something? What if we got rid of all of that? How much time in a day does a human being need to work? Whether it's making food, caring for shelter, having fuel to do whatever you need to do. And he was doing this alone. And it's an amazing little book. It's hard to read. He's a little verbose, but it's an amazing book because he actually tells you exactly how much he spent on every single thing and how much food he actually needed to grow to survive. And it's not very much. I can't remember whether it was Frankl or Thomas Merton. One of them. I was trying to look it up before the class and I couldn't find it. But one of their quotes, he said that the human being inside has been, I wish I could have found it, has been amped up to such a artificial pitch of desire that we don't even know what we want anymore. Like we are so bombarded with ideas of grandeur that we must have the house, we must have the the income. We must have the trip to Paris. We must have the car. We must have this. We're not even beginning to access what it is to be human, what it is to connect with God, to connect with nature, to connect with each other. Like we've completely lost ourselves to the whole thing. And of course, so to them, it was all about, they went into solitude, right? They completely contracted into solitude and said, I have to sit here and even find myself before I can reintegrate into society. And I think that's the most interesting thing about money, is to release everything we've ever been taught. Like, let it all go. Because there's something so, it's almost like the whole pursuit of money. It's like chasing something that doesn't exist. Because it's just a piece of paper. You know, there's no human chutzpah, like there's no human reality in it, which makes it so elusive. And again, do I think there's something wrong with with making a lot of money, with having a successful business? And, you know, it's like there's this lovely person in town, and she always sold croissants at the farmer's market. And then people, like, she was selling out of croissants so quickly, it was insane. And so one day someone said, you know, wouldn't it be great if you made a cafe? Because we didn't have any cafes here. And she did. She created a cafe around this passion. Do I wish her anything but exceptional financial abundance? I hope they are so incredibly successful. And they have been. They're epic. They're my favorite place to go and have coffee. You know, this isn't about not wanting abundance or having shame and guilt around having money. That's not it. But it is really important to really look at this weird spell that we've been put under that makes us think that makes us think that we shouldn't actually walk our path and enjoy our life and contribute in the ways we love to contribute, all for the sake of this strange idea that money's been made into. I'm going to put my glasses on. So if you guys have any questions or thoughts, I'm happy to hear them. Chutzpah. I just like saying it. I think his book's called Walden Pond. I think that's what it's called. We need shelter, heat, and calories, right? This talk needs to be a series. On Walden Pond, yeah. And love, right? You know what's really interesting about imagining what we want in life? The money piece distracts us so much from even being relaxed enough to love, being relaxed enough to connect with each other. What was the name of the Greek guy with the anthropomorph theory? Oh, it's like, I can't say it in English. It's like Iakokakis or something, and nothing was translated into English. And it's a whole story around that guy. But I could send it to you. I can send you his Greek name. But no, there's nothing in English. I'm recording it. I'm recording it on video, and I'll upload it to Insight Timer. The difference between surviving and living. Yeah. It's so interesting. find myself often falling into a scarcity mentality and I want to move into abundance. Well, and this is the weird thing about money is there's actually no scarcity of it. It's just being hoarded. And I'm not wanting to jump into some weird conspiracy world or anything. I'm just saying that they say that if all the money in the world was equally divided or distributed amongst the 7.5 billion people on the planet, every person would have $8 million. like, it's not like every person would get $2,000. They'd get $8 million. There is no scarcity of money on the planet. There's piles of it. And again, it's just interesting. It's an interesting world. And there's huge value in simply stepping back. That's all. Like just stepping back, stepping into our witness mind and really observing, okay, hold on a minute. What are the beliefs about money in my family? What are the beliefs about money in my society, in my partner, in me? What do I actually think about money? Because whatever we believe about money is all fabricated, because money isn't real. It isn't actually a thing. Money is simply something that if we were all living in community, maybe we would exchange something different, or maybe we would say, well, I don't have an extra chicken, so here's some beans or something. I'm not saying everyone has to barter, but even the idea of bartering, what's crazy about this whole money idea? It also comes out of a fear mentality in our entire society. This fear of lack, this fear of scarcity. Because if it didn't exist, if someone came home to your house and they said, hey, I'm short some butter, could I borrow a cup of butter? You'd say, sure. You wouldn't say, well, what are you going to give me for it? You just give them the butter. I was talking to my sister this morning and we were talking about this. And she said, she says it was like when you were traveling. She said, oh, you going to the States? And I said, yeah. She goes, oh, I've got some American money here. I'll give it to you. And of course, she didn't say, okay, this is worth $30 Canadian. Could you have $30 Canadian for me? She just gave me the American money because it's of no value in Canada. It's just American money. It's just funny other little pieces of paper. And so she just gave it to me in the same way that, let's say I needed a pillow. And she said, well, I've got 7 pillows. I don't need a pillow. Here, have a pillow. I don't have to barter for the pillow. She has a pillow. She doesn't need the other pillows. Like, we have this weird thing about every single thing that's come into our house now has this strange false value. But if we have lots of potatoes, why wouldn't I just take potatoes? But again, we have to get out of this strange idea that people are going to take more than they need. They're going to take more. It's like, you know what I mean? Like, we have to there's an entire paradigm shift required. Because if people are going to hoard, then we're going to be afraid to open up and just give them beans or butter or money or whatever. But if someone just simply needs it, well, why wouldn't I just give it to you? I don't understand. There's no financial value to it. It's just food. It's just shelter. It's just money. It's like my sister, she says, like it's like I'm giving you this money, this American money, because they require this for you to get coffee. So here are some tokens to get coffee when you're in the States. In the same way, hey, I've got this extra travel carry-on bag. Do you want to use that for flying? Wouldn't that be cool? Like, it's not more interesting than that. When I get into the scarcity mode, I think I have to talk about the plenum. Right. For anyone who's new to that, the plenum is a David Bohm concept, who's a quantum physicist, that when we look around us, we think we just see space and nothingness. But he said, what if it's full? Like even right now, as we sit here, and you imagine the air around you, we tend to assume it's empty. But it's not. You can feel it, even as you're moving through it. It's full. It's a plenum. It's full of all kinds of amazing things, and even our minds, all the spaces are full of opportunity and ideas. When we embrace the plenum, anything's possible. It's amazing. Sometimes I play the whole, okay, what's the worst case scenario? Sometimes we do that kind of thing. And, financially, you kind of think, well, I guess bankruptcy. I guess bankruptcy's the worst case scenario. But here's the funny thing about the threat of bankruptcy. The only thing bankruptcy means is that you can no longer borrow money. It doesn't mean you can't make money. It doesn't mean that you can't contribute to society. It doesn't mean you can't grow food or take care of people's children or build houses or fix cars. It doesn't mean anything except that you can't play in the debt world anymore. So it's kind of funny when you really think of it, that the threat of bankruptcy, it's the only place that fear model works is within the debt system that enslaves us to begin with. So when you kind of sit there and think, well, what if I just worked? Okay, maybe I can't have my own house. Okay, maybe I will find another solution. Solutions appear. Like, it's almost phenomenal how the solutions appear in ways that we could never. It's almost like the more we release the ideas of what, again, all these interesting levels of consciousness that we've talked about, when I can release what pride requires, amazing things are possible. When I can release what desire requires, anything's possible. Recently I was able to pay off credit cards. So I decided, because I've really been thinking about this money thing for a while. Like, it's just because it's not even I'm thinking about it. I keep seeing something. It's just like seeing the houses. Like, I keep looking at them going, this doesn't make any sense. Like, it's almost like the veil is coming off. And so the old program isn't working anymore. So the entire idea about money is completely shifting. And so I paid off a credit card and I canceled it because I thought, well, I don't need it. I'm not planning on going into debt. I really like this idea of just working and spending that money and just living in a truly cash way. That's it. None of this debt. And the hilarious thing is I got a message from my bank saying that my credit score had gone down. Because I canceled this $12,000 credit card. And these things that happen and they just kind of, they hit you in such a funny way. I'm like, I just paid off this credit card and canceled it. And they considered that a negative thing in my credit score. Anyway, I laughed a long time about that. And, in the land when you start to realize, oh man, they are losing ground. I laughed my head off. It was awesome. It's awesome. Well, thank you guys so much for being here. And I will see you next time. Hope you have an awesome day or evening, wherever you are.